Well, thank you, everybody, for joining today's media avail to provide an update on the forest fires in Churchill Falls. Some good news, but also some risk assessment for today. The good news is that this morning the fire hadn't changed in scope in terms of the perimeter or the category. It remained at a Category 2 in the morning. However, the fire does seem to escalate and get more aggressive throughout the day, and it is already now at a Category 4. The big problem, and what we perceive as a real risk, is in the next 24 to 48 hours. Given the weather pattern, we have some unfavorable winds and some unfavorable humidex conditions, which leads to an increased risk of the fire crossing the river. So we wanted to give that update to everybody, that there is indeed in the next 24 to 48 hours a heightened risk of the fire crossing the river and subsequently a heightened risk to Churchill Falls community. So everyone needs to be aware of that. We do have the right resources in place to battle this fire right now. There is no question about that, and the officials can comment on that. Currently, we have 6 water bombers tackling the leading edge of the fire to provide suppression tactics in order to keep it at or below a level 4, and hopefully that will provide the required mitigation to prevent it from crossing the river. That said, we want everybody who is from the area to be aware that this is a heightened level of risk today and tomorrow. We do also continue to work on the fire break in Churchill Falls community, and that continues to occur as well. Hydro, actually, and Jennifer will speak to this, took some I would say some preventative measures yesterday with respect to preventative spill at the facility, and I'm sure those people will have some questions about that. But they also have, I want to assure everybody that the asset is an incredible world-class asset, but we are firstly and principally focused on the people who are in the community, the people who run the plant, and their safety is paramount. As you all know, most have been evacuated from the community, but there remains approximately 100 people in the community. And right now we will be assessing on an hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute basis, really, based on the feedback from officials, any heightened requirements of evacuation for those remaining in the plant and looking after the community. We're not quite there yet, but we wanted to communicate that message to people who may still be in Churchill Falls. Of course, we've already done that, but we also want to extend that to people who may be displaced throughout the province from the community itself. To all the employees and people who live in Churchill Falls who are there now or have been displaced, please know that we have your backs. We will be there for you through all of this, and hopefully this passes and there will be rain. There's rain in the forecast for Thursday, I believe. We will be there for you. And I met many of you in Happy Valley Goose Bay 2 days ago. I flew back with some of you, and I can appreciate the stress and anxiety that this has caused for you and your families. Seeing a family with young children and a baby, leave the plane in the middle of the night going to a family member's home, but away from their own home. And I can only imagine the stress and strain and anxiety that causes. So I'll continue with my message to make sure that you're checking on your neighbors, but also checking in on yourself. There's no shame or embarrassment of feeling that stress and anxiety under these circumstances. We do have supports in place. Please avail of them if you need it. And please ensure that others know that they're there if they need it. 811, bridge the gap, and we have a counselor on the ground in Happy Valley Goose Bay currently if there's any employees who feel that they need an extra bit of support or they just need to chat. I'd also like to continue to thank the people of Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and the Big Land in general, Lab West, for welcoming these people displaced from their own homes. It's the true spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador and the big heart of the Big Land. So thank you for all you're doing. And thank you again to the hardworking women and men who are on both fires. There's people on the ground on the other fire doing that incredibly intense work on the ground. And to the fire that's closest to Churchill Falls, the hardworking women and men who are in the aircrafts doing fire suppression. Know that everybody across the provinces thanks you for your service, and you're displaced from your homes as well. And we can all appreciate exactly what you're doing. And again, a heartfelt thank you. Everyone continues to ask us what they can do to help the people of Churchill Falls. I'll reiterate, even though it's a Capelin weather outside here in St. John's, and you think it may be safe to light a fire, please don't. This is not the time to light any fires across the province. There is a full fire ban on. It may seem safe in your local environment, but we need to make sure that we're protecting the resources and not doing anything foolish like putting people at jeopardy, putting the hardworking women and men who are on the front line doing the heavy lift. We don't want to jeopardize their safety and dilute the efforts that they're providing to the people of Churchill Falls. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Williams to provide an update from Hydro's perspective.
Thank you, Premier. Underline what the Premier had to say is that the employee safety and the folks that are on site making the assets safe, including the government employees with fire and emergency service, as well as contractors that we have on site, all of their collective safety is the most important. And that is really top of mind in every conversation that we have. What actions do we need to do to continue to make sure they're safe? And then when do we make any alternative arrangements and alternative plans? So that is very much top of mind. Working closely with government has been, I think, the key to the response so far. It really has been what has enabled us to achieve what we have achieved thus far, to make sure we are in lockstep, to make sure we are supporting both the people on site as well as the people who have indeed been evacuated. So that close conversation that we're having many times a day with many different departments has been really, really important. We are planning for various scenarios that could occur over the coming days, from the kind of status quo scenarios to the more difficult scenarios, and that is related to what the Premier mentioned a few minutes ago, that we made a decision yesterday to open up, or I should say close a gate up above so that we could allow for a reduced plant load. And so we have gone ahead and done that. And that is really going to enable us, if we have to take people out of site, that we can have a smoother process in that event. We will have had that done and behind us. It doesn't mean that we think that that's going to happen. We are just planning for that eventuality. The impact associated with that is that you have a lower plant load, and we did that in consultation with our customers being those in Labrador, but certainly those in Quebec as well. So we're very much aligned with all of our customers, so they're not really seeing any impact at this time with the choice to make to have the plant go to minimum load. The fire break, I'll just speak very briefly about that. As we've mentioned before, 8, 10, could be more than 10 kilometers by the time we finish all the bits and pieces. We've started on the western side, which is the highest priority for protection of the assets, and we will continue moving west. There's really 2 steps in that process. Is you take all the vegetation down first, and then you basically scrape all of the stuff below the vegetation back to clay, and that gives you the best chance for a fire break. So it's pretty extensive work. It is not days of work. It will be multiple weeks of work, and we're about 20% on a component of that, the vegetation removal, but not as far on going back to the gravel or the clay component. So we're averaging about 15% complete at that point. The Premier mentioned there's about 100 people on site. We have about, I think it's up to 20 or so fire and emergency services folks, about 20 contractors, and about 60 hydro employees. The Premier mentioned, it's really important that folks look after themselves between government and with hydro as well. there's a lot of resources that we have in place, both on-site as well as remotely, to make sure that we're supporting people. And I will underline what the Premier had to say. We really do ask for people to reach out and get help, get your questions answered. Sometimes it'll take a little while to get specific questions answered, but ask, and we will do everything we can to get you supported in whatever way that it is that you need. And I think that's really the extent of what I would note at this point.
Sure, and as we know, this is a very real-time and dynamic situation, so I've just been informed in real time, so unlikely to be able to answer too many questions on the exact nature of this update, but unfortunately we've just got word that the fire has jumped the river, which is what we were trying to prevent. It's what we were all hoping wouldn't happen. So there is a very much a heightened level of risk of fire propagation now on the community side of the river. Very much live information as we're providing it with you. Obviously, my opening was a little different than I'm providing you now. So that is a live update. We will continue to provide mitigation efforts on both sides of the river, and we hope that will contain the fire and mitigate any aggressive propagation on the community side of the river. But breaking news, if you will, it has just crossed the river, and which is important for everybody in the community and those who've been displaced from the community to know. So we'll open it up for questions now, and I'm sure you have questions for us and for the officials that may be able to. As we were speaking, they were texting with people for live updates. So if we'll answer the questions as best we can. But hopefully, you all appreciate we're being open and honest in real time with all transparent information that we receive live.
Jennifer, with this news now, does this kickstart any plans that you have in terms of getting crews out of Churchill Falls or anything like that?
Yes, certainly. And as the Premier said, we are finding this out. But however, we were planning for this eventuality. And as I mentioned, that is why we made adjustments at the plant last night, just in case this has to happen. That is now something that we don't have to do in this moment. Obviously, we'll have to continue to work with Fire and Emergency Services on their timing assessment, if it is indeed going to propagate or not. So I certainly don't want folks to think that they should be grabbing their bags at this point. We will definitely continue to take direction from the officials. But in our planning scenarios, we are planning for hotel rooms. We are planning for charter flights. We have already been in discussion with provincial airlines on having those things arranged and on standby. So we were planning for that more extreme type scenario. So I'm really glad that we've been working with government every step of the way to put all these what could happen scenarios in place, and we put mitigations there. We are really putting everything we can into making sure that we can do this. Happy Valley Goose Bay just proved that they can receive a large number of people. I think they just dust that off and they get themselves ready again. So we will continue to work with the officials on what is the right time to take any action, if any action needs to be taken.
There's really 3 levels of evacuation plans, as I understand it. One would be the current, where there's 80 to 100 people there on watch, on guard. The second would be where only essential employees remain while watching the fire and the fire dynamics. And the third would be full evacuation with remote capacity potentially available.
I'm wondering whether or not the fire officials can give us any more sort of clarity on exactly where across the river it is, how close it is to the community, and what sort of...
Sure. The point where the leading edge is still about 7 kilometers, but I'll turn it over to Jamie or Blair, who could perhaps tell us exactly where it dipped across.
So Premier, thanks. It did dip across the river right at Rapids, so right at the very top flank of the fire. We had a hit, I guess, an indirect hit, and the fire started ahead of the existing perimeter. So that's where it is. And, those discussions around what level of evacuation we should consider are happening right now in real time.
And I'm wondering, so for you, how concerning is this development, and what does it do to sort of the overall risk to the community?
For all of us, or very concerning. I mean, from day one, we wanted the we hoped, we prayed that the fire would stay on the correct side of the river, and that the river would act as a natural barrier, fire break. So very concerning, but I think it's premature to say how the fire will behave in what is in a new scenario, with an incredible amount of fuel in front of it on the banks of that river, a very steep bank, potentially, which could cause a rapid spread of the fire. I think so. It's premature. It's concerning. It's very concerning. But to Jennifer's point, we've planned for this, and now it's time to take stock and evaluation of which of the 3 evacuation orders need to be employed right now.
Can you speak to what, so you said it's a lower plant load right now. Can you just explain what that means?
So obviously, the plant itself can generate up to 5,400 megawatts, but we are operating at about 900 megawatts now to Quebec, and then several hundred megawatts to supply all of Labrador. So that is the operating load that we have set at this point, and we've set the water control structures to enable that to continue unfettered. So it can run for a period of time, as long as there's no big other disturbances that would cause the plant or the water moving to have to shift. It can really kind of run for quite a period of time with no change.
And when we talk about remote operations, just how remote, I guess, if that makes sense, can this kind of an operation become?
Sure. So the plant, as a late 1960s design, was not designed like a modern plant that does have remote operation, but our teams were able to implement limited monitoring and some remote operation in the last number of days. And so even the other day when we were in Goose Bay.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yep. The Premier was able to witness one of our employees, making a change with regards to the plant loading right in front of him, right from Happy Valley Goose Bay. So, but it is limited operation. So I want to be really clear that we don't have, it's not the same as having a control center that's the one that's normally at the plant, copy it into Happy Valley Goose Bay. It is very limited operation. But if you're not modifying the operation of the plant for customer load, it's okay to have that very limited operation. So we're working with our customers to make sure that they know that they are going to have limited ability to vary their load or their draw on the plant right now. So as long as no other things change materially, we should be able to continue, even if we have to take people fully out of the plant. Certainly not ideal. It hasn't been done before, but that is what we're hoping that we should be able to do with implementation of this remote monitoring and very little remote operation ability.
What role does Muskrat Falls play in this? Because it's still up and running, and if you had to, or you lost that capacity from Churchill Falls for whatever reason,
right,
could Muskrat Falls power be used to keep customers on in Labrador?
Yes. So we do have that ability to run, have Muskrat Falls supply Lab East. It cannot supply Lab West. So we do have plans in place for, okay, how do we supply these 2 major load centers? So Lab East has the ability to rely on Muskrat Falls. If something was to happen at Muskrat Falls, we actually have a backup combustion turbine in Happy Valley Goose Bay that we could also rely on as even another contingency scenario. Over in Lab West, if something was to happen there, we actually have had pre-discussions with Hydro-Quebec on essentially redirecting some of the power from their side of things back into Lab West. We would not be able to supply the full peak load of customers, so we would have to work with customers in the area to help them understand what impact they might see. But we have plans in place to cover, I would say, the majority of the load in Labrador.
This means obviously sending much less power to Quebec. How are they able to adapt, and what does it mean for customers there?
So without, subject to check, as they say, in a regulatory forum, I think we're about 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts typically in the last little while going from that plant to Quebec. So, and I don't know what the Quebec demand is in the summer, but let's say it's 50 or 60 gigawatts. It's a really big load. So removing about 1,000 megawatts from their demand is not really significant. Obviously, they would like to have the flexibility to call upon the load from that plant, and it does impact them some. But as I understand it is not a significant impact for them at this time.
Premier, for the families and people who have been displaced by this fire, they've been out of their homes now for about a week, I believe. Is there any thought being given to any sort of financial help for people who maybe aren't able to work right now, or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So, and Jennifer can comment as well. We said we'd be there to support the families, and we will. I mean, even an incredible amount of anxiety, and the last thing they should be thinking about is the cost of this displacement. So we have done things to help with the cost, whether that's chartered flights or hotel rooms or other things, but we will work with them to ensure that their costs are covered. I spoke to one gentleman who only had time to grab, a pair of jeans and shorts and doesn't have a change, and so I'm sure that he'll acquire some clothing, and we'll be there to work with them through the company to ensure that they get remunerated appropriately for being displaced. But to be clear, no one's laid off, right? Like, everybody's still being paid, and they will continue to be paid for sure.
Question for Jamie. How does the fire jumping the river change firefighting efforts? Does it mean that water bombers are now, wetting down a different area, or what does this change to the overall effort?
Thanks, Peter. I think the biggest thing is, we would continue to fight the fire, including that leading edge, provided it doesn't get to a higher risk classification. So if we can keep the fire from getting to level 5 or a level 6, then I think we would be working hard, similar to what we've been doing before, to douse those areas pretty good. If we get to a 4 or 5 or 6 in classification, then it's really at the limit or beyond the limit of bombers being able to be in the air. So that's kind of the scenario there right now.
Can we just, again, I think it was mentioned, but how many, like, what do the resources look like right now that are on the ground?
So right now we have a lot of resources on the ground, 6 bombers flying regular circuits with some to spare, right, Jamie? And there's helicopter resources. There's actually people on the ground, as we said, in the other fire as well. So this is not a matter of balancing resources. This is a matter of Mother Nature cooperating, and we feel like we're appropriately resourced. It's just Mother Nature needs to give us a hand and give us some rain and let the humidex change and the wind patterns change. But as you just heard, and I witnessed it in the fire just outside Grand Falls, if it gets up to a 6, first of all, it's unsafe for the bombers, and secondly, they don't accomplish anything. It's just too aggressive, and the flames are too high to really have any difference from a drop.
All right. Well, I guess we'll carry on with you right now. Thank you, folks.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie and Blair.